Hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching Monday's edition of COVID-19. A cluster outbreak here in the country has pushed the daily tally up to the 400s again. While on the international front, movement restrictions and closures persist in many parts of Europe as authorities seek to contain coronavirus variants. I have Kwon So standing by with the updates. So let's begin here in the country then.
Sure, Sunny. We have a rise in infections despite today being a Monday when usually numbers tend to go down due to lower numbers of tests over the weekend. But that's not the case this Monday. We have a rise to the 400s with 437 infections confirmed as of 12 a.m. And if we break down Monday's caseload, 405 is the domestically transmitted number of cases, while we have 32 infections from abroad. And the total number of coronavirus cases here in the country stands at 75,521, the death toll at 1,360, and we have a little over 11,200 people remaining in quarantine and almost 63,000 people who have made a full recovery from the virus. Now, we started off last Monday on a better note as we dropped down to below the 400s. But although we have that rise today, and overall the numbers have stabilized to below the 500s. Now, if we take a look at our map now, we have here 102 cases in the capital Seoul, followed by 76 in Gyeonggi-do province and 14 in Incheon, which means the number of cases in the metropolitan region stands at below 200. So for the first time in a long while, the number outside the metropolitan region combined stands above that in the central region. And that is because this number here in Daejeon, 125 infections were confirmed in a day, raising the total here to above 1,000.
I see. So staying with the outbreak over in Daejeon, please tell us more about it. It happened at a missionary school, I hear. Right,
Sunny. A total of 127 students and faculty tested positive for the virus at a Christian missionary training school since the first outbreak there confirmed on Saturday. And that includes 116 students out of 120, meaning almost 97%. The IEM school, reportedly an unaccredited religious education facility, was found to have violated basic virus prevention rules. Up to 20 students were said to have been living in a dorm, and there were no partitions installed between dining tables. Officials are urging a swift response to this cluster infection that could escalate into another similar outbreak as that of Shincheonji or BTJ, earlier mass outbreaks linked to places of worship that were difficult to contain.
This time, we must avoid repeating such a scenario. I call on the Central Disease Control Headquarters to fully mobilize their contact tracing resources and stop the spread.
Meanwhile, on the international front, so I understand Israel has decided to ban passenger flights into the country starting this Monday.
That's correct, Sunny. The country with the fastest vaccination rollout per population has taken another step to contain the virus, banning all inbound and outbound foreign flights until the end of this month. So this move should also help the country's vaccination program and also prevent COVID-19 variants from entering the country. And the U.S., meanwhile, is also expected to ban entries from South Africa, also due to concerns over the variant there. And the UK is mulling tighter border controls, while Sweden just issued a travel ban on Norway. Sunny is going to connect to a doctor in Norway to talk more about the situation there. And let's take a glimpse at the numbers here. 25.7 million total numbers were confirmed in the US. And over the weekend, we have France having surpassed 3 million total infections. And also Colombia has become the 11th country in the world with over 2 million cases just this weekend. And with that, the total number of cases stands at 99.7 million and the death toll at 2.1 million. And those are the updates I have for now. I'll be back with more tomorrow. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, so thank you for that. Right. Meanwhile, on the international front, authorities in Norway have imposed stringent restrictions in several municipalities, including Oslo, following an outbreak of the new coronavirus variant first detected in Britain. For more on the latest there, I have Dr. Ernst Christian Rodland at the Norwegian Institute of Public Health live on the line. Welcome, Dr. Rodland.
Thank you so much, and greetings from Oslo, Norway.
Right. Doctor, just start by telling us more about the new prevention measures that are in effect from this past weekend in response to the presence of coronavirus variants there.
That is correct. We have been following the trends for a while, and we discovered in the end of last week some cases with the B117 virus, what is called the English mutation. And we couldn't trace it back or link it to traveling to England or to other countries in Europe. So that's why really swift action and implemented more strict rules and advices to prohibit or to make sure that people don't get in contact too much, restrict movement of people between municipalities, etc.
How long, Doctor, will these measures be in place then?
That is very difficult to say at the moment, because we implement these measures to get a better overview of the situation. So I would say that during this coming week, we will have a much better overview, and then it will be decided upon. So these rules and regulations change quite often, almost continuously.
I see. So non-essential shops are closed, though?
All shops are closed except grocery stores and pharmacies for at least this coming week till the end of January. Also, they have, as we heard yesterday, today, kindergartens and schools are also closed, at least quite a few of those, as I said, to get the overview. And then they decide for how long these measures has to be implemented.
I see. Meanwhile, Dr. Rodeland, what is the latest with regard to the tragic loss of at least 33 elderly lives there following COVID-19 vaccinations?
Well, in Norway, we have the policy that we started to vaccinate the residents of the nursery homes first, to get alongside and together with healthcare personnel. So this group of people, residents in nursery homes in Norway, are really the most frail and elderly people in the society. The reason why we decided to vaccinate these people is that we know that old age is the #1 risk factor for serious disease and death. But also in this group, we have to consider that they have already, under normal circumstances, quite reduced life expectancy, and so we expected high mortality rates in this group. As a matter of fact, around 300 and 400 residents in nursery homes in Norway die every week from other conditions, from any conditions. So that we get a relationship in time with the COVID-19 vaccine doesn't necessarily mean that it's a casual relationship between the deaths and the vaccine given. But these are numbers and situation that we follow very closely. But as of today, we have no statistical analysis or no findings that suggest that it's the vaccine itself that caused these deaths. This is a very frail and sick group of people, and deaths are expected, as a matter of fact, during this vaccination process as well.
I see. So authorities have found no direct link between the Pfizer vaccine and these sad fatalities then?
As of today, we haven't found any direct link between the deaths and the vaccine. So that is correct.
Then in light of these very sad events, Doctor, should the elderly with pre-existing health conditions avoid inoculation, in your opinion?
That is a very difficult question. What we have decided in Norway is that we believe strongly that the benefits from the protective effect of the vaccine outweighs the risk of serious side effects. But this is being discussed now intensely over the last days too, particularly because of these cases with deaths related to the vaccination. So I think that the guidelines will be changed a little bit, and maybe the sickest and most frail people with a very limited expected lifespan should not be vaccinated. This is being discussed these days as a result of these deaths that we have observed.
I see. Doctor, what is the public response to these events?
It's of course being debated in the media and in social media. in Norway is a country where the population have great trust in authorities. So we try to give information in the best possible ways through traditional channels and in social media, and try simply to provide that people can make informed decisions as good as possible.
I see. What about the government's vaccine recommendation for young and healthy adults?
Well, the mRNA vaccine that is being used in Norway has been shown to have effect against serious COVID-19 disease and death. But as of today, it hasn't shown to reduce transmission of the virus. We strongly believe it will, but we are waiting for the results and documentation on that, and have prioritized in the Norwegian immunization program to vaccinate the people who are at the highest risk of serious disease and death. So that's why we have made a priority list strictly after age, actually, and the youngest and healthiest people in Norway are last on that list.
I see. Meanwhile, one final question, Doctor. What efforts are being made by authorities there to address potential concerns over COVID-19 vaccines?
That's what I just mentioned. We believe in Norway that vaccination is a personal decision, and I think this decision has to be made on as good information as possible. So we are trying to use and to inform about all positive and potential side effects of the vaccination to the general public, and then they have to make a decision. Traditionally in Norway, we had a very high vaccine uptake. And as I also mentioned, the public is generally trustworthy towards the advices and information that comes from the government.
All right, Dr. Rødland, thank you very much for making the time to join us live with your thoughts at this very early hour at your end.
Yes, that's fine. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Right. Our reliance on the internet has grown tremendously in light of COVID-19 restrictions that have called for remote working, remote learning, remote shopping and remote socializing. Well, behind these remote interactions are network administrators who seek to make our online exchanges as active as possible. Do take a look.
The world's internet traffic and data volumes have seen an explosive rise amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Data shows a 30% jump in global internet traffic between late February and late March last year, when the pandemic began spiraling out of control. Network managers are now working day and night to keep internet services running amid the data surge. They must know about the cabling infrastructure inside and out, and monitor the data flow in real time to ensure that services are running smoothly.
지금 트래픽 용량이 갑자기 늘어나가지고 링크를 증설하는 작업을 하고 있습니다. 아무래도 통신이라는 게 잠깐이라도 끊기면 많은 사람들이 불편함을 느끼게 되잖아요.
Network managers are dealing with a full plate and then some amid COVID-19.
코로나 시작하고 나서 모든 트래픽들이 많이 증가를 해가지고 업무도 덩달아서 많아졌습니다. 특히 요즘같이 트래픽 용량이 많은 시기에는 새벽이나 주말에도 긴장을 늦출 수 없는 어려움이 있습니다.
There's always work to be done, even late at night when most of us are asleep. Between midnight and 2 a.m., the early morning staff gets to work on optimizing the networks. The job is demanding, but the workers say they feel more rewarded than ever.
밤새 작업을 하다 보면 많이 힘들죠. 피곤하고 하는데 아침에 일어나가지고 고객들이 일상에서 사용하고 있을 때 아무 민원이 없을 때 그때가 좀 보람이 있다고 볼 수가 있죠. 지금 요즘 일상에서 이제 사람들 만나기는 어렵지만 온라인에서는 아무 끊김없이 아주 자연스럽게 만날 수 있도록 그렇게 했으면 좋겠습니다.
Winds of change are blowing at the telecommunications sector amid COVID-19.
현재 저희 쪽은 네트워크 감시가 가장 중요하기 때문에 원격지에서 네트워크 감시할 수 있게 이런 부분에 그 AI 기능을 갖다가 도입을 해서 보다 빠르게 고객한테 그 안정적인 서비스를 제공할 수 있도록 노력을 하고 있습니다.
Data used to access online lectures have been made free of charge, and the government has also upgraded the networks at all public schools across the country. Custom support is being provided for virtual religious services, and even call centers have been set up.
가장 중요한 게 이제 재택근무, 일단 온라인 교육이 가장 크다고 볼 수가 있습니다. 시스템의 트래픽 용량도 증설하고 고객하고 바로 연결돼 있는 회선 쪽의 트래픽도 바로 미리 그 사전 대비해서 20% 30% 트래픽 용량을 갖다 미리 증설을 해놨습니다.
The world is going more online and virtual amid the pandemic, and it was all made possible thanks to the hard work and dedication of these workers.
We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges.
정부는 미국 바이든 신정부와 함께 한반도 평화 프로세스의 진전을 위해 계속 긴밀히 협력할 것이며 북한과도 대화와 협력의 길로 되돌아가기 위해 최선의 노력을 기울여 나갈 것입니다.
Korea and the US are poised to start a new chapter of bilateral diplomacy as the Biden administration has taken office with intentions to reaffirm its ties with its allies. Now, for more on these efforts and others, I have Professor Im Eun-jung from Koongju National University. Welcome back, Professor Im.
Thank you.
And I also have Guy Taylor from the Washington Times joining our talk virtually over from Washington, D.C. That would be. Pleasure to have you with us, Guy.
Thank you so much.
Guy, according to U.S. media, President Joe Biden is poised for a very busy week of executive action ahead of him, that is this week. What is the latest on that front?
Well, certainly President Biden's first few days in office were already consumed by settling into power, but really he already signed more than 24 executive orders. These were nearly all focused on very domestic issues, but really aimed at essentially undoing several controversial policies of the Trump administration. For instance, Biden signed an order to re-enter the United States into the Paris Climate Agreement. In another, he ordered that construction on Mr. Trump's infamous border wall along the U.S. border with Mexico be halted. While these executive orders are really capturing media attention, I think the number one thing that Biden was focused on in his first couple of days and will be in this coming week is setting a new tone, a new national leadership tone with regard to getting control over the raging COVID-19 situation in the United States. Right away, Biden announced a mandate for masks to be worn on all federal government property pretty much at all times, also calling on states to do a better job enforcing masking. And really then behind the scenes, he's pushing for a major national organization for expediting the rollout of vaccines. I think we're going to hear more about that this week. And also, I think we're going to see the focus broaden a bit. I think I anticipate more appointments to the cabinet this week. It's not clear whether those will be foreign policy appointments, but I think there will be in the next day or two a couple of more appointments. And I think we'll see President Biden also beginning to telephone more foreign leaders in the days ahead as he really settles in and he feels, I think, confidence in projecting this coronavirus COVID-19 reaction plan that's really been the center so far.
Right. Meanwhile, Professor Im, the national security advisors of Korea and the U.S. reaffirmed bilateral commitment to regional peace and stability over the phone this past Saturday. Does this signal the start of a fresh chapter of diplomatic ties between the two allies?
Absolutely. Not only just between Mr. Seo and Mr. Sullivan, also we did have another phone call between newly appointed Minister of, Secretary of Defense for the United States, again, the Mr. Lloyd, General Lloyd Austin, and then our Minister of Defense, Seo-uk. They also exchanged a phone call over the weekend, and both phone calls, of course, the leaders of the two governments, they reconfirmed the importance of the ROK-US alliance, still the robustness of the alliance. They reconfirmed it, and they reconfirmed it is a linchpin for the peace and the stability, prosperity of the Indo-Pacific region. So I think it's a very good start. Of course, we are waiting for another phone call, probably between the Mr. Blinken and Mr. Chang, or another phone call between our presidents. So I think between the two leadership, they made a good start, I think, for this moment.
Now, Guy, you mentioned this, but there appears to be many pending domestic priorities, including COVID-19, like you mentioned, that need to be addressed by the Biden administration. How does that reality look to affect the new administration's diplomatic agenda, do you think?
Look, it's absolutely true that there are pressing issues on the domestic front, from COVID, but also to the deep political divisions that we saw roar pretty violently to the surface in Washington in Trump's final days. But I think we have to understand that Biden is bringing to power a very experienced team, capable of chewing gum and walking at the same time. The focus is going to broaden in the days and weeks ahead. It's already been broadening. I think we've already seen, despite these domestic crises, we've seen serious diplomatic and national security moves, such as the extension of the New START treaty late last week. That's a very big development. That being said, I think we also have to be wary that other world powers are eager to shape the relationship with the Biden administration, particularly adversaries testing the administration now. We saw over the weekend the Chinese making an incursion into Taiwanese airspace. This was, I think, Beijing's test of how much support Biden will publicly give to Taiwan. We saw right away that the State Department has responded by saying the U.S. commitment to Taiwan is rock solid. I think it's interesting that just as a journalist covering the State Department over the last 4 years, the speed with which the Biden administration responded with clarity was just so much faster and clearer than what had become the norm with the Trump administration, where you might hear conflicting messages from the Pentagon, from the White House, from the State Department, and then from the president himself. So I think that we have to sort of wait and see how things develop, and world events will affect this. I mean, right now you have pretty big demonstrations, or over the weekend you had pretty big demonstrations in Russia against the government there. Everyone is watching to see how the Biden administration will respond to that and what it will say.
Right. Now, Guy, you mentioned that appointments are still being made, but what can you tell us about the lineup of the new diplomatic and security team under President Biden thus far?
Well, really, what we have coming into shape is an all-star team of the center-left Democrat establishment in Washington. This is not a dovish group, but it's also not a pro-intervention group either. It's really a group with lots of experience, though. It's essentially President Obama's second term 2.0, meaning several major players who held high-level positions in Obama's second term are back now, but with promotions. Notably, though, there's the addition of Kurt Campbell, an Obama first-term player who's now back in power on the National Security Council, really in a pretty heavy behind-the-scenes sort of role. I think when it comes to understanding what the administration's Asia policy is going to look like, whether it's towards South Korea, Japan, or China, or any nation in Southeast Asia, or really the region as a whole, the Indo-Pacific, I think we have to consider that Kurt Campbell, who really pushed for the American pivot to Asia almost a decade ago now under Obama, is going to be in the center of that policy. But we also have to see on East Asia that Biden has named already Sung Kim as acting assistant secretary at the State Department. This is important. Sung Kim is probably a more seasoned hand than just about anyone who was out front on North Korea policy for the Trump administration. So he's also very close personally with new Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and is going to play a key role likely in determining who ultimately gets tapped as North Korea envoy. We don't know who that's going to be yet. And it might not be an appointment that comes right away, but I think you can start to see momentum towards some of the more granular levels of the policy team coming together in the coming weeks.
Meanwhile, Professor Im, unlike the former Trump administration, the Biden administration is believed to prefer a bottom-up approach. Now, what does this mean with regard to the role of working-level officials?
First of all, I definitely appreciate Mr. Taylor's wonderful analysis about the new appointees. Kurt Campbell, as you just mentioned, is one of really the key persons, I think, too, for the upcoming administration's foreign policy. And having said that, as just Mr. Taylor mentioned, their teams are very well-rich, experienced people. They are elites. They are true Washingtonians. Mr. Trump and the President Trump's people, of course they were elites too, but they were a little different or distant from the hardcore, how would you say, those insiders of the Washington. They were a little different from those groups. But this time we had back, again, all those, inner insider of the Washington, which means, we also need to be careful, and then we also need to be much more communicative with all these elite people. They are knowledgeable, they are experienced, they're really, how would you say, professional. So in that sense, I would say, for example, Minister Chung Eui-young, our president, newly appointed this career diplomat. He is also the politician, very well-rich, experienced person, as the new minister for the foreign affairs, which is, I think, a good decision. Those kind of more like veterans need to be again more willing or even capable to communicate again with all these Washingtonians, true Washingtonians. So I'm looking forward to the more deeper, comprehensive communications between the two groups. Mm-hmm.
Professor Im, perhaps the greatest variable to peace efforts here on the Korean Peninsula is North Korea's stance. Now, its leader, Kim Jong-un, has sworn off talks with the U.S. until the administration withdraws its hostile policy. What are your prospects with regard to Pyongyang's future actions?
Well, Pyongyang had really difficult time too. Again, over the last year, even South Korea, Japan, or any country had a really difficult times. But North Korea as well, even though they officially say, we don't have any confirmed case in the territory, but who knows? I mean, we really don't know the truth. And even though, what they are saying is true, but still, that doesn't necessarily mean that their economic situations or their public health situation is good enough, right? So they have their own very, very difficult time. And having had that, they got now totally new team. Again, all this elite people inside of the Washington. So it looks like North Korean regime, those leaders, it looks like they are also very cautious. They are just watching what's going on, and that their resources might have been limited to, again, throughout the last year. So having said that, we'll see. But my concern, or many probably other experts are a little concerned, pretty much concerned actually, about the upcoming or joint exercise of the South Korea and U.S. Because it's scheduled on March. But if it's really for this moment, it might be really difficult to have a full-fledged joint exercise because of COVID situations. Definitely, we don't want to unnecessarily stimulate the already weakened the North Korean regime. They might be overly reactive, right, to any that kind of how would you say, those action that looks to them again hostile. We're doing this for our own defense, and we need to do this for our own, again, OPCON transition too. But from their point of view, they can be overly reactive too. So March is another probably critical juncture in terms of regional security or the peace of the Korean Peninsula. Mm-hmm.
Professor, simply speaking, what are the respective stances of Seoul and Washington with regard to Pyongyang?
Well, I mean, in need time, I think, again, as Mr. Blinken mentioned, he mentioned that we need a kind of full review, right? Full review means, I think it means many things. It does indicate that they do think of past, whatever those past actions or approaches did not actually work. For example, again, the Mr. Trump's that kind of more like a personalized summit diplomacy. It looked very, dramatic and the theatrical scene we observed, but we didn't have any tangible outcomes, right? That kind of, again, the criticism, I think, is also embedded in that statement. But that does not necessarily mean that, this new administration want to flip everything, right? Flip everything. Because we also, at the same time, we don't need to negate whatever those positive side of our past. So probably, I hope, again, Mr. Blinken or many other those good elite people, they know the process because they are very well experienced, especially for the Iranian case. So they know how to do the incremental approach or multilateral approach. So they will, I think, do another make another good approach. But the thing is, again, the timing issue, right? It takes time. And as I said, in March, we will have joint exercise and our administration is running out of their time. So all this timing is really kind of concern. But in the longer term, I want to remain more optimistic. Mm-hmm.
Right, and we also have the COVID situation.
Yes,
so.
exactly. Mm-hmm.
Guy, what are the prospects being shared by pundits in the US with regard to North Korea and its nuclear ambitions?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I agree with Professor Lim that, it's a team of Washington insiders that Biden is bringing to power. And really this biggest question being asked around town by people who aren't on that A list that are getting appointments. The big question is, can this group of insiders, are they willing or are they really capable of trying anything truly new or creative on the hard security challenges? That said, I think Biden, based on his history, based on his campaign statements, he's unlikely to pursue the kinds of high-stakes direct meetings with Kim Jong-un that President Trump sought after. People close to the administration that I'm talking with are saying Biden is likely to avoid doing anything unexpected or surprising with regard to North Korea policy in his first 6 months, at least. And then he's really likely to return the United States to the so-called policy of strategic patience. That was something that was really pushed during the final years of the George W. Bush administration, excuse me, and throughout the Obama era when Mr. Biden was vice president. So, the approach will likely revolve around ongoing efforts to isolate Pyongyang through U.S. and UN sanctions, while, taking care to avoid rewarding the Kim regime with any major diplomatic overtures. However, there are some questions about the extent to which Biden might be willing to offer some sort of carrot to the Kim regime in the form of humanitarian or medical aid, or at least turning a blind eye to such aid if South Korea were to forge ahead with it. I think there are rational players in the new administration who are weighing that right now. Although, the issue with it is that they don't want to be perceived by Pyongyang or anyone else in the region as giving a gift or an overture to Kim Jong-un that says, hey, there's a new administration in the U.S. and it's no problem with the new administration that the Kim regime is showing off its new submarine-launched ballistic missiles. I think you're going to see the Biden administration likely push for, continued U.S.-South Korea military drills. I cannot emphasize enough, though, how the appointment of a North Korea envoy is ultimately going to shape how the policy looks, because as you pointed out, I think Biden appreciates the bottom up approach, and that means that someone at that level of appointment is going to have a lot of influence about how often they travel to Seoul, whether they travel to Tokyo, whether they try to make a trip themselves to Pyongyang. And I think they're going to have a green light from the administration to do that.
Right. And keeping in mind what Guy has just said, Professor Lim, how should Korea prepare, South Korea that is, for possible shifts in strategy in dealing with North Korea?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, you know, my really kind of how you say what I'm really sad is again my current administration is running out of their time. That's really which is very unfortunate, I think. But anyhow, for the upcoming this 1 year at least, I truly hope my government can explain very well what really we want to have in this region and in the Korean Peninsula to the new administration. Because if you think about the transition from the Trump administrations to the Biden administration, we watched all this drama, right? I mean, Mr. Trump, he didn't attend the inauguration, and he just left the White House and he went to the Florida with that new briefcase. So we watched all this drama that indicates that probably, again, all this transition process between the Trump and then Biden administration might not have been that smooth, which means, might mean the new administration might have only just limited information, limited understandings. It might be again. It might have been a little difficult to the full information of what happened in Singapore or what really happened in Hanoi or between the two summits. So my point is, again, for example, newly appointed Foreign Minister Chung Eui-young, he was there, right? He know all this reality. He know the process. So these kind of people really need to explain very well again what really happened, what we really missed, and then what should have been done. Right, so that kind of retroactive judgment or self-criticism might be necessary too. So that kind of process, hopefully, I want to see for the upcoming months and years to narrow down whatever those cognitive dissonance between the two or opinion gaps between the two. Again, the Blue House and the White House.
Right. Meanwhile, guys, keeping our attention here in this region, what appears to be the Biden administration's diplomatic strategy towards China and Japan?
Well, I think right now the signs are that the China policy is going to be a lot less rhetorically confrontational with China than it was in the Trump era, but otherwise it'll be very similar to what Trump set in motion, essentially proceeding with this sort of reset that Trump triggered. I mean, let's look at what Anthony Blinken said during his confirmation hearing last week when asked by the very flamboyant Trump-supporting Republican Senator Lindsey Graham whether he supported the idea of declaring a genocide in China, really of accusing Beijing of carrying out genocide against Uyghur Muslims. Blinken said he totally supported the Trump administration's last-minute declaration of a genocide. That was some pretty strong positioning or an indication that the China policy will continue to be pretty strong and in line in many ways with what Trump did. I think when it comes to Japan, similar to the U.S.-South Korea alliance, the U.S.-Japan alliance is very strong, and I think that the Biden administration is going to try to nurture it. And I think you're going to see an effort both behind the scenes and somewhat overtly publicly by the Biden administration to try and smooth over the friction between Tokyo and Seoul and to try to get this trilateral approach going in a more positive trajectory quickly. And I think that the possibility for the Moon administration to have a very good relationship with Biden is there. But we're also in a bit of a wait and see. It's early days.
Right. And Professor Lim, do you suppose such efforts by Washington would perhaps reflect positively on Seoul's ties with Tokyo?
Yes. Again, there's Washingtonians, elite people, insiders of Washington. They see today's China not only just as a competitor, as more complicating, because they do see the China as a revisionist power, which is challenging against the liberal world. So, which means that that is why Mr. Campbell, he just recently wrote an article in the Foreign Affairs, the journal, and he said, you know, we need really recover the legitimacy of American leadership. So this is a very interesting wording. Again, the legitimacy, he really emphasized that. So having said that, how to deal with this revisionist power against China is really key question for the Biden administration. And having said that, they definitely need to cooperate with not only just South Korea and Japan, Australia, or even Taiwan, Vietnam, whoever do share similar concerns about the China's new type of challenges from China. So, you know, they are now trying to have a bigger picture. So whenever we have, again, the friction with the Japan, definitely Washington is uncomfortable. But one good sign I do see these days is, again, that we appointed another new ambassador to Japan, whose name is Kang Chang-il. He's another very well-experienced, rich experienced politician. He received his PhD, for example, from University of Tokyo. So he has a very good networks with the Japanese people. So we are trying to refresh too, even though we have very difficult court rulings, for example, Comfort Women related court ruling or forced labor ruling. But still our political leadership is trying to refresh the mood. So I hope, again, that Tokyo can accept this kind of, our new, how would you say, the approach, or our willingness to refresh the mood. And, Tokyo Olympic, we cannot be that optimistic as of now, but if it can be really another big chance, I think we can use that at the moment too.
Right.
Yes.
Guy, turning back to domestic issues over in the US, you talked about mask mandates being put into place. What other measures have been implemented to better tackle the COVID-19 crisis there in your country?
Yeah, I think that actually one of the big elephants in the room with the Biden policy is that there's nothing tremendously new that he's introduced. It's really just that he's admitting that the situation is dire and that the United States has a problem and it needs to get the numbers down. And he's talking about it in a way that is very serious. And I think this is a stark departure from where we were a month ago with the President Trump, who contracted COVID-19, struggled to pay attention to it for more than a few minutes at a time, obviously promoted a policy of making the vaccine and getting the Warp Speed program to do this historic effort to get the vaccine. But beyond that, really downplaying the idea of mask wearing and giving life to an entire significant segment of the American population that doesn't really take the coronavirus seriously at all. I mean, there are areas of the United States where you can go and people will actually shun you for wearing a mask in their establishment. This is so trying to reverse that, I think, is what Biden is trying to do. And then I think you're going to see that there's going to be more talk in the coming days about really what the national strategy is with regard to clarifying to the states who gets the vaccine first, what populations will be getting it first. We're just starting to hear about that last week, and I think we're going to hear more about it in the coming days.
I see. All right, Guy, thank you very much for joining us live with your thoughts at this hour. And Professor Im, as always, thank you for being with us today with your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Right, well, that ends our coverage for this Monday. Do refrain from non-essential outings and gatherings and do seek to abide by safety precautions. Thank you for watching.